Texas Guinan. Mary Louise Cecilia Texas Guinan, January 12, 1884, November 5, 1933, was an American actress, producer, and entrepreneur. Born in Texas to Irish immigrant parents, Guinan decided at an early age to become an entertainer. After becoming a star on the New York stage, the repercussions of her involvement in a weight loss scam motivated her to switch careers to the film business. Spending several years in California appearing in numerous productions, she eventually formed her own company. She is most remembered for the speakeasy clubs she managed during Prohibition. Her clubs catered to the rich and famous as well as to aspiring talent. After being arrested and indicted during a law enforcement sweep of speakeasy clubs, she was acquitted during her trial. Personal life and early career. Guinan was one of four siblings born in Waco, Texas, to immigrants Michael and Bessie Nee Duffy Guinan, who had immigrated separately as adults, meeting and marrying in Colorado. Both parents were of Irish ancestry. They initially operated a wholesale grocery business. Relocating to Texas, they ran a horse and cattle ranch. As a child, she was nicknamed Mammy and attended parochial school at the Loretto Convent in Waco, Texas. Growing up on a ranch provided her with basic cowboy skills, and she honed her marksmanship at a local shooting gallery. In 1898, her parents were successful in securing her a two-year scholarship to the American Conservatory of Music offered by Chicago businessman Marshall Field. After developing her soprano vocal talents and finishing her studies, she joined a touring acting troupe that featured American Wild West entertainment. By 1904, using the name Marie Guinan, she married newspaper cartoonist John Moynihan on December 2. 2 years later, Moynihan took a job in Boston. The couple eventually divorced, and Guinan moved to New York to pursue a career as a singer in the entertainment business. For years, she claimed she had been born with the name Texas and never let facts stand in the way of her narrative. In a full-page 1910 interview in the San Francisco Call, she stated her father was the first white child seen in Waco, although he had been a married adult when he arrived and white settlers had been there since the early to mid-19th century. Theater critic and photoplay editor Julian Johnson was her companion for a decade and was influential in the creation of her public persona. Many erroneously believed them to be married. Her 1933 obituaries mention Johnson as her second husband and millionaire George E. Townley as a third husband. Lacking any verification that the latter two marriages took place, Moynihan is now believed to have been her only husband. Johnson's connection is thought to have led to a poem carrying her byline being printed in photoplay. An alleged connection to the U.S. Senator from Texas, Joseph Weldon Bailey, evolved over time from a nonspecific tie to her family. The niece relationship seems implausible, since her parents were born and raised in a different country. Mentions of him coincide with the timeline of her association with Julian Johnson. While he was editor at Photoplay, an article written by then-staff journalist Adela Rogers St. John's remarked that Guinan bore a distinct resemblance to her uncle, Senator Joe Bailey of Texas. Vaudeville and stage productions. Films. In a film career that began in 1917 and continued through 1933, she was part of the vanguard of women filmmakers in the United States. Her later claims of being in France in 1917 entertaining the troops and being decorated with a bronze medal by France Field Marshal Joseph Joffre has been proven false by the timeline and California location of her prolific film-making. Triangle Film Corporation, founded in 1915 by Harry Aitken and Roy Aitken, featured Guinan in four two-reel shorts between 1917 and 1918. The Fuel of Life, The Stainless Barrier, The Gun Woman, and The Love Brokers. Unlike the musical genre she was known for on stage, she was now moving towards the Western movie genre, and on her dressing room door appeared a map of the state of Texas, rather than her name. Triangle began billing her as the female Bill Hart in reference to the industry's first Western star who at that time topped fandom popularity polls. Froman brothers were Broadway producers. In 1915, brother Daniel Froman and partner William L. Sherrill formed the Froman Amusement Corporation, a motion picture business. They made more than a dozen films with Guinan in 1918, including The Boss of the Rancho and The Heart of Texas. During her years with Bull's Eye Productions/Reelcraft, she began to expand towards the production end of film making as a unit department head on the films Outwitted, The Lady of the Law, The Girl of the Rancho, The Desert Vulture, and at least 5 other productions. She created Texas Guinan Productions in 1921 to produce Code of the West, Spitfire, and Texas of the Mounted. After I Am the Woman and the Stampede for Victor Kremer film features, she returned to New York. Guinan was again seen on the screen with 2 sound pictures, playing slightly fictionalized versions of herself as a speakeasy proprietress in Queen of the Nightclubs 1929 and then Broadway Through a Keyhole 1933, written by Walter Winchell shortly before her death. Queen of the Nightclubs. The 1920 18th Amendment to the United States Constitution put prohibition into effect, making sales or transport of alcoholic beverages illegal. While it ruined legitimate businesses, people continued drinking alcohol. Those who transported and sold it were known as bootleggers. Thus began the establishment of the speakeasy private clubs, a cultural phenomenon in which Guinan excelled. Her introduction into the business was when speakeasy partners Emil Gervasini and John Levy of the Beaux Arts Club hired Guinan in 1923 as a singer, for which she was paid $50,000. Guinan's give-and-take dialogue with the customers inspired producer Nils Granlund to put together a full-floor show with Guinan presiding as MC for Ziegfeld Follies chorus girls. Bootleg huckster Larry Fay struck a deal with them to feature the show at his El Fay Club on West 47th Street in Manhattan. There, she became known for her catchphrase, "Hello, sucker, come on in and leave your wallet on the bar." In return for being the draw to attract wealthy and powerful clientele, Guinan received 50% of the profits. Ruby Keeler, Barbara Stanwyck, and George Raft were discovered by talent scouts while working as dancers at the club. After being shut down by the police, she opened the Texas Guinan Club at 117 West 48th Street, also closed by the police. She and Fay later opened the Del Fay Club in Miami the same year. By her own account, they once took in $700,000 in less than a year. When Guinan returned to New York in January 1926 as hostess of the 300 Club at 151 W 54th Street, the opening night's event was the marriage ceremony for actress Wilda Bennett and Argentine dancer Abraham Pepe. Other celebrities who visited her club were Al Jolson, Scottish operatic soprano Mary Garden, Jack Dempsey, American operatic soprano Geraldine Farrar, and the Prince of Wales. In July 1926, the 300 Club was raided by the police, who seized bottles of liquor and arrested 2 people for violation of the section of the Penal Code forbidding suggestive dances. The last week of June 1928, Assistant U.S. Attorney General Mabel Walker Willebrandt ordered a raid of speakeasy clubs in New York. Guinan, Helen Morgan, hostess of Chez Helen Morgan, Nils Granlund, and 104 others were arrested and indicted by a federal grand jury. Guinan, Morgan, and Granlund faced 2 years in prison with a $10,000 maximum fine if convicted. The others indicted were employees and patrons, who faced lesser penalties. At her April 1929 trial, Guinan was acquitted. Final years and death. During the Great Depression, she took her show on the road. She attempted to move to Europe, but Scotland Yard threatened to board her ship if she tried to land in England, where she was on their list of barred aliens. The show was banned from France under labor technicalities. Guinan had a contract with a Paris club, but French employment laws dissuaded non-citizens from working in France. She turned this to her advantage by launching the satirical review Too Hot for Paris upon her return to the States. While on the road with Too Hot for Paris, she contracted amoebic dysentery in Chicago, Illinois, during the epidemic outbreak at the Congress Hotel during the run of the Chicago World's Fair. The epidemic was traced to tainted water. She fell ill in Vancouver, British Columbia, and died there on November 5, 1933, age 49, exactly 1 month before Prohibition was repealed. Bandleader Paul Whiteman was a pallbearer, along with two of her former lawyers and writer Haywood Brown. Guinan is interred at the Calvary Cemetery in Queens, New York. Her family donated a tabernacle in her name to St. Patrick's Church in Vancouver in recognition of Father Louis Forget's attentions during her last hours. When the original church was demolished in 2004, the tabernacle was preserved for the new church built on the site. She was survived by both of her parents. Her father was 81 years old at his death on May 14, 1935, and her mother died at age 101 in 1959. The newspaper obituary listed his place of birth as Sherbrooke, Quebec, Canada, and his profession as a wholesale grocer. Her brothers Tommy and William P., as well as her sister Mrs. George C. Smith, also survived her. Legacy. Actress portrayals of Guinan 1927 Broadway Nights, DeSassia Moore's 1945 Incendiary Blonde, Betty Hutton. 1961 The George Raft Story, Barbara Nichols. 1961 Splendor in the Grass, Phyllis Diller. Fictional characters based on Guinan 1920s Miss Misery Martin, Damon Runnion's short stories about Broadway. 1932 Maudie Triplett played by Mae West, Night After Night. 1939 Panama Smith played by Gladys George, The Roaring Twenties. 1960 Sally Kansas played by June Havoc, episode The Larry Fay Story, The Untouchables. 1984 Vera played by Diane Lane, The Cotton Club. Velma Kelly, the musical Chicago, personality modeled on Guinan and backstory based on murder suspect Belva Gardner. Guinan, fictional bartender, played by Whoopi Goldberg, Star Trek, The Next Generation Miss 4007 Black Hats, as a character in the novel. Gallery. Filmography. Written by Texas Guinan. How to Keep Your Husband Out of My Nightclub, Liberty Magazine, No 18, April 30, 1932, pp. 50-51, 1. Oh, Professor. College Humor, June 1932, p. 24. Footnotes.